The Collector's Daughter by Gill, published by William Morrow and HarperCollins. And this is very much the story of the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb and the actual entry into it by Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon. But it's also the story of Lady Evelyn Herbert, who was Carnarvon's daughter, and she had a very privileged life growing up at Highclere Castle, which we know now is the backdrop for Downton Abbey. So hers was a life of tradition, which was fostered by her mother, but she was so much the daughter of her father. She wanted to be a lady archaeologist, and therefore she went with him on several occasions to Egypt and was there when Tutankhamun's tomb was opened. This is a fascinating subject for a novel because when I was at school, Tutankhamun, the exhibition, came to London, and I remember being absolutely fascinated by all the artefacts that came with that one awe-inspiring mask. And I remember being in a room, a darkened room, as people sort of strode past, in single file, past this wonderful, wonderful mask, and just one strobe of light highlighted it, and it was just such a memorable experience. So Gill describes what the opening of the tomb was like, and from my tiny experience of seeing his wonderful mask, it must have been something extremely staggering. And Evelyn says, it was the thing that really stuck with her all her life, and I'm not surprised. The novel is set both in the 1920s, at the period of the discovery in Egypt, and it's also set in London in the 1970s. Eve, Lady Evelyn, has just had another stroke, and she's really struggling with her mobility and her memory and her speech. And her husband, Brograve, is there to support her, and they've had a wonderful marriage over the last 30 or so years. And this is a point in her life where she has kind of memories about what happened at the excavation of his tomb. And there is a woman called Anna Mansour who has come, she's an academic, and she's trying to find out where some of the pieces that were clearly catalogued in the tomb are no longer around. And of course there is that discussion about what happens to artefacts from a tomb. Do the people who find it, they probably took some things with them, but also, they have to stay in Egypt because they are Egyptian property. And in 1922, I think it was, that Egypt was actually getting independence from Britain. And so there are all these ethical dialogues that were going on about what would happen to the contents of his tomb. And that's a really interesting facet of the novel. The author has clearly researched the whole history of Tutankhamun and the discovery of the tomb. And the colour of Egypt comes to life, of the period and of the contents, and what it must have been like to actually be there at the opening of his tomb. So I think if you have any fascination for the period, for Egyptology, then this novel by Gill is just a wonderful reconstruction of what might have happened and probably did, and the sort of knock-on effect, because of course there was that issue that there was a curse on the tomb, and anyone who entered it would suffer illness, tragedy, death. And certainly we know from history that quite a few awful, awful things happened to the people who were involved in the discovery and opening of that tomb. So really a great novel to pick up and just delight in as memories of the period come into sharp focus.